I went to YuGiOh Nationals all the way out in Indianapolis, Indiana. And though I do want to make a video talking about what happened up there in my experiences, there is one particular thing I want to talk about in this video. While I was in Nationals, though I wasn't a participant in the main event, I did play a lot of YuGiOh side events. Those being stuff like Win-A-Mat, Attack of the Giant card, regional qualifiers, as well as some of their alternative formats. I was able to play in the Speed Duel main event, where I found a couple players were playing Control, turning Speed Duel into regular Yu-Gi-Oh with how long it takes, as well as playing in Rivalry of Warlords. Now, if you don't know what Rivalry of Warlords is, basically Konami creates approved decks, which you are given in the hopes that you have never played these decks before, or you very scarcely know how to play these decks, and they hand them to you and they tell you good luck, and they usually give you a little pamphlet telling you how the deck works, what combos you typically want to go into. They give you about 5 to 10 minutes to figure this stuff out, and then you enter your main event. Now, in the past, these events have been known to get a bit stale. The decks were from like 2014. The cards that were in there, they basically tried to keep it as pure as they possibly could. They didn't really have any staple cards such as Ash Blossom and stuff like that. So there's more to be desired from the game. But as of this past Nats, they actually souped up the decks and they gave us pretty much all new decks. There's a few old ones that still linger in there, but they got new support and we got a bunch of new decks. A few examples being Sharks, Millennium, Mimighoul, Shining Sarcophagus, Blue Eyes White Dragon, and Odeon Eldritch. Not only are these new decks that get brought in, but they also got some new staples. Most decks had board breakers such as MST or Twin Twisters. They also had stuff like Dark Hole and Mirror Force. But they also had a few hand traps, notably being DD Crow as the default choice, but some of them having a Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, or even Nibiru. They also had insanely powerful staple cards, like some of them had Perulia and some of them even had Dominus Impulse. And the icing on this cake is some of the decks had banned cards in it. For example, the Mimighoul deck had Metamorphosis, as well as having 2 copies of Pot of Greed. And the Odeon Eldritch line also had 2 copies of Graceful Charity. Now, with some of the decks that they chose to put these banned cards in, I do agree that some of the decks don't need it. For example, Odeon Eldritch does not need 2 copies of Graceful Charity. However, a deck like Libromancer could really use something like Pot of Greed. And it's very interesting because each day, they took feedback from the players. You could go online, scan a QR code, and take a survey, and they would change the deck. They nerfed, buffed, nerfed again, and buffed again Sharks throughout the entire weekend. Mainly because people were complaining that they put Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome in the deck day 1. And at one point, they took Bahamut Shark out, but still kept Toad. And then I'm pretty sure that they put Toad out but put Bahamut Shark back in. That deck just got a bunch of changes. However, like I said, a bunch of decks didn't really need it. For example, Mimighoul didn't really need Metamorphosis or Pot of Greed in a format where you get next to no hand traps. I know I mentioned that these decks had stuff like Ash Blossom, Dominus Impulse, Perulia, but they didn't put play sets of these cards in. You got 1, maybe 2, and even then you had to draw these cards. So, whenever you're playing Mimighoul against a deck like Shining Sarcophagus, a deck that requires you to have a continuous spell on field for it to work, then things get real complicated real fast, especially when you add floodgates such as Mimighoul Fairy that say you do not get to special summon from your hand. So where do we go from here? I believe that where we go from here is that we basically just take these surveys at these events and have them fine-tune the decks later on. Now, I do want to point out, I don't know how true this is. However, apparently the general synopsis is that the judges actually donated these decks to be borrowed for these events. These weren't Konami cards that they gave the judges for us to play. The judges made these decks, put them into the Rivalry of Warlords pool, and then gave them out. So I'd like to give a big thank you to the judges who did that. That is incredible that you did that. It would make a lot of sense for reasons Perulia and Impulse are in the decks, as well as high rarity cards. The Mimighoul deck actually had a good number of QCR Mimighoul cards in the deck, so they put a lot of faith in the community to not just take these cards. And to my knowledge, I haven't heard anything about these cards being stolen, so the community did a good job by not taking these cards and just sabotaging the goodwill of these judges for loaning out their cards. However, the discussion now turns to, should the judges keep doing this, or should Konami just give them these cards to give out. And I think the simple solution is I think Konami should give them the cards of the decks to give out. However, I think Konami should specifically print Rivalry of Warlords versions of these cards to put into decks. What I mean by this is potentially taking a card and putting a big stamp over the artwork that says for Rivalry of Warlords use only. So if you see a player with this card, it is not legal for regular tournament play, and thus they cannot use it in locals, cannot use it in regionals, and if they caught using it, they will get disqualified and banned. The solution is not perfect, I do realize that, because if you have a card that is only used for Rivalry of Warlords that the judges have to give back to Konami, then you have the problem of people stealing these cards because they are only available through these events. Nobody can actually get their hands on these cards, and people are going to steal them, not caring about getting banned from the event, but they just want to get a profit. Like I said, not a very solid solution, but it is a solution, so that way these judges don't have to worry about getting their $90 cards stolen by degenerates. That's pretty much the discussion I want to put out today. Just a quick short video talking about Rivalry of Warlords. I think that what it just did is incredible. I think that it's bringing new life to this format, and it got everybody talking, especially using the banned cards. So anyway, you guys think in the comments down below. Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think that they should keep banned cards out of it? Do you think that they should make cards for Rivalry of Warlords? And do you think that Konami themselves should just reprint some of these older cards to do this? It's also interesting that they could potentially do Rivalry of Warlords for Goat and Edison, so that is something else that Konami could do. With that being said, I'm gonna get up out of here. You guys enjoyed this video, make sure that like button, come take a video, make sure to subscribe button, help channel, help share hosting as a whole. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.